A promise is supposed to be a rock-solid guarantee for millions of American public workers, firefighters, teachers, police. That promise was a pension. Decades of your life in service to the public, in exchange for a secure retirement. It was a bedrock of the American middle class. But what happens when the rock turns to sand? Right now, across the United States, a slow-motion disaster is unfolding. A crisis with a price tag so big, it's hard to wrap your head around. More than $1.3 trillion. That is the gap between what's been promised to public retirees and the money that's actually there to pay for it. This isn't just some accounting mistake. It's a ticking time bomb threatening the futures of 15 million Americans. And nowhere is this fight for the future being fought more fiercely than in three very different American places: a fallen industrial giant, a Caribbean territory, and a heartland economic powerhouse: Detroit, Puerto Rico, and Illinois. They all stared into the same abyss of financial ruin, crushed by decades of pension debt. But they all chose radically different ways out. One declared bankruptcy, tearing up contracts and forcing its retirees to pay the price. Another had its democracy suspended, placed under the control of a federally appointed board that sparked cries of colonialism. And the third, well, the third is trapped in a state of political paralysis, seemingly unable to do anything while its taxpayers foot an ever-growing bill. This is the story of those choices, the fallout, and the uncomfortable truth about who really pays the price when a lifetime of promises vanish into thin air. Number 1. Detroit, the bankruptcy play. Before it was a symbol of urban decay, Detroit was the engine of American prosperity, the Motor City. It built a thriving middle class, and for generations, a city job wasn't just a job. It was a deal. You give us your career, we'll give you a dignified retirement. That deal was built on the idea that the good times would never end. But they did. As the auto industry sputtered and jobs fled, the city's population collapsed, dropping from a peak of 1.8 million people to less than 700,000 by 2013. The tax base evaporated, but the promises remained. By the early 2010s, Detroit was a ghost of its former self. Streetlights were dark, emergency services were skeletal, and underneath it all was a mountain of debt. In 2013, the city's total liabilities had ballooned to over $18 billion. A huge chunk of that was money owed to retirees, about $3.5 billion in unfunded pensions and another $6.4 billion in unfunded healthcare costs. The city was broke. For decades, city leaders had kicked the can down the road, underfunding the pension systems and papering over the gaps with rosy investment projections. It was a slow, politically convenient slide into disaster. The anger was real and deeply human. Think about it from the perspective of a firefighter who spent 30 years running into burning buildings. The deal was simple. You risk your life, and the city takes care of you when you can't do it anymore. Then, suddenly, you're told that check you planned your life around might not come. Protests erupted. City council meetings became crucibles of fear and anger. These weren't numbers on a spreadsheet. They were grandparents and neighbors who were now facing the prospect of losing everything. The problem was, in most of America, earned pension benefits are considered untouchable, often protected by state constitutions. But Detroit was about to test the limits of that promise. In July 2013, the city did the unthinkable. Led by a state-appointed emergency manager, Kevin Orr, Detroit filed for Chapter 9 bankruptcy, the largest municipal bankruptcy in U.S. history. This was the nuclear option. Bankruptcy court is one of the few places a government can get the power to rewrite its contracts, including those sacred promises to its retirees. The solution was called the Grand Bargain. It was a desperate, last-ditch deal. A coalition of private foundations, the state of Michigan, and the Detroit Institute of Arts chipped in over $816 million. This money wasn't used to pay off Wall Street. It was used to soften the blow to the city's pensioners. It was an amazing act of civic solidarity, but it wasn't a get-out-of-jail-free card. Retirees still paid a heavy price. General City retirees had their monthly checks cut by 4.5% and lost their annual cost of living adjustments, or COLAs, forever. For police and fire retirees, the direct cuts were avoided, but their generous cost of living adjustments were slashed. On top of that, all city-funded retiree health care was eliminated. It was brutal, but it was decisive. Bankruptcy allowed Detroit to wipe out about $7 billion in debt and reinvest in basic services. The streetlights came back on. The city had a chance to breathe. A decade later, Detroit's finances are stable. The city has balanced budgets and is even setting money aside in a special fund to protect retirees. There's been talk of giving pensioners a one-time 13th check to help with inflation, but fully restoring the cuts is a fiscal impossibility. For the retirees, the scars are still there. They are, as one representative put it, still paying for the bankruptcy every month. Detroit's story became a chilling precedent. It proved that the unbreakable promise of a pension could, in fact, be broken. Number 2. Puerto Rico. The Colonial Playbook. Hundreds of miles from Detroit, another American pension crisis was festering in a completely different context. This wasn't a city. It was an island territory of 3.2 million American citizens, caught in a web of economic decay, crushing debt, and a complicated colonial legacy. Puerto Rico's problem was, in a word, astronomical. By the mid-2010s, the island had piled up a staggering $123 billion in debt and pension obligations. Of that, an estimated $50 billion was just for unfunded pensions, a hole so deep it was impossible to climb out of. But unlike Detroit, Puerto Rico had a unique and devastating handicap. As a U.S. territory, it was explicitly barred from using Chapter 9 bankruptcy. It couldn't use the one tool that had allowed Detroit to force a reset. It was trapped. In 2015, the governor declared the debt unpayable. The island was speeding toward a full-blown humanitarian crisis. As the government ran out of money, austerity became the law of the land. Schools closed, public services were gutted, and the already fragile infrastructure started to crumble. Then came Hurricane Maria in 2017, followed by earthquakes and a pandemic. More than 43% of the island's population was living in poverty. Into this chaos, Washington, D.C. intervened. In 2016, Congress passed a law called PROMESA. This law created something unprecedented, a 7-member Financial Oversight and Management Board appointed by the U.S. President. This board, known on the island as La Junta, was given sweeping powers to control Puerto Rico's budget and debt. Effectively, the island was put into receivership. The democratically elected government was now subordinate to an unelected panel. For many Puerto Ricans, it felt like colonialism. Protests became a fixture of daily life. The message was clear. La Junta was there to make sure Wall Street got paid, at the expense of ordinary citizens. The board was accused of imposing devastating austerity while racking up over $1 billion in its own fees, all paid for by Puerto Rican taxpayers. The process dragged on for years. While Detroit's bankruptcy took about 17 months, Puerto Rico's restructuring was a marathon. The board used a special part of the PROMESA law, Title III, to start a court-monitored process similar to bankruptcy. The outcome for pensioners was a long and painful saga. Initially, La Junta proposed deep cuts, but after fierce resistance, a final plan was approved. The deal that was ultimately struck was less severe than the worst-case scenarios, but was still a major blow. Retirees receiving less than $1,500 a month were protected from direct cuts, but all cost of living adjustments were frozen for everyone. And for all future government workers, the traditional pension system was gone, replaced with 401k-style plans. For someone like Maraida Caraballo Martinez, a school principal with 28 years of service, the freeze on her pension plan means she feels she can never afford to retire. The PROMESA solution has been a mixed bag at best. The island's budget is now technically balanced, but the austerity has left deep scars on schools and hospitals. The economy is fragile, propped up by federal disaster funds. Critics argue that without a real plan for economic growth, and with an unelected board still in charge, Puerto Rico is just waiting for the next crisis. The colonial playbook stabilized the patient, but the long-term prognosis is uncertain. Number 3. Illinois. If Detroit is the story of a dramatic collapse and rebirth, and Puerto Rico is a tale of outside intervention, then Illinois is the story of a slow, grinding, and seemingly endless crisis. It's a state that has been watching a fiscal iceberg approach for decades, yet seems completely incapable of turning the wheel. The problem in Illinois isn't just big. It's the biggest. Illinois has the worst-funded public pension system in the entire country. The state has saved only about 50 cents for every dollar it owes its retired teachers, university employees, and state workers. The total shortfall is a number that almost sounds fake: over $140 billion. This debt is so massive that pension costs now eat up nearly a quarter of the state's entire budget, crowding out everything else: education, infrastructure, you name it. How did it get this bad? It's a textbook case of politicians from both parties kicking the can down the road. For decades, instead of making the required annual payments to the pension funds, they would short them. They'd use that money to fund other programs or avoid raising taxes, basically borrowing from the future. It was a bipartisan conspiracy of procrastination, and now the bill is due. The pain in Illinois is felt not by retirees facing cuts, but by the state's 12 million residents who are paying the price. Illinoisans are crushed by some of the highest property taxes in the nation, and those tax hikes aren't for better schools. They're to feed the pension funds. Businesses and residents are fleeing the state, pointing to the insane tax burden. So why doesn't Illinois just pull a Detroit? The answer lies in 5 simple words in the Illinois State Constitution: shall not be diminished or impaired. This is the state's pension protection clause. The Illinois Supreme Court has ruled that it's an unbreakable contract. You can't cut benefits, period. This makes the Detroit solution legally impossible without a constitutional amendment, which is a political nightmare. And unlike Puerto Rico, Illinois is a sovereign state. No federal board can come in and force a solution. This creates the ultimate political stalemate, trapped between a legal wall and a political one. And so, Illinois dithers. They've tried issuing pension obligation bonds, basically using one credit card to pay off another. They created a less generous Tier 2 pension system for new hires, but it's so stingy it might even violate federal law. Every potential solution is a political landmine. Raising income taxes further could speed up the exodus of residents. a proposal to create a new statewide property tax just for pensions was met with fury. The result is a state perpetually on the brink. Its credit rating is among the lowest in the nation. The budget is an annual zero-sum game, where pension payments devour funds that could go to fixing roads or helping the vulnerable. Who pays the price in Illinois? Right now, it's the taxpayers. They're paying more to get less. And public workers live with a strange uncertainty. Their pensions are legally safe, but they work for a government that is slowly being strangled by the very cost of those promises. It's a slow-motion disaster with no end in sight. Number 4. Synthesis and the verdict. So, 3 crises, 3 locations, and 3 starkly different playbooks. Detroit took the path of surgical amputation. It used the brute force of bankruptcy law to do the impossible. It cut benefits. The process was swift and brutal. Retirees paid the price directly, losing income and health care. In exchange, the city got a second life. Puerto Rico's path was one of subjugation. It couldn't choose bankruptcy, so a solution was imposed on it. Promesa brought financial discipline, but at the cost of sovereignty and years of withering austerity that punished everyone. The price was paid not just in pension freezes, but in closed schools and a loss of self-determination. And then there's Illinois, the land of the unbreakable promise. Locked in by its own constitution, it has chosen the path of a paralysis. Instead of one painful event, Illinois is choosing death by 1,000 cuts. The price here is being paid almost entirely by taxpayers, through sky-high taxes and decaying public services. So, who ultimately pays the price for decades of broken promises? The devastating answer is everyone. They just pay in different ways. In Detroit, the retirees took the most direct hit. Their life savings were sacrificed for the city's survival. In Puerto Rico, the pain was spread wider. Retirees lost future security, but the entire population paid through austerity dictated by an outside power. In Illinois, the burden has been shifted onto the public. Taxpayers are saddled with a debt they didn't create, forced to pay more for less, while retirees watch the state crumble around them. What this all reveals is an uncomfortable truth. There are no easy answers. Each path carries a profound cost. Detroit's solution was effective, but broke a sacred trust. Puerto Rico's brought order, but at the cost of democracy. And Illinois's inaction, born of legal rules and political cowardice, may be the most corrosive of all, ensuring the crisis never really ends. The stories of Detroit, Puerto Rico, and Illinois are canaries in the coal mine for the rest of the country. The math doesn't lie. Across America, pension systems are grappling with the same problems. The national unfunded liability for public pensions has been stuck above $1 trillion since the 2008 financial crisis. While the stock market has helped recently, the system is fragile. One bad recession could cause that debt to swell past $2.7 trillion. These aren't just numbers, they represent the retirement security of the people who kept our communities running. They also represent a massive liability that falls on every single taxpayer. The choices made in Detroit, San Juan, and Springfield offer a sobering menu of options. Do we break promises to retirees? Do we surrender local control to outside forces? Or do we slowly suffocate our public services and tax our citizens into leaving? These are the brutal choices that more and more American cities and states will have to face. The pension crisis isn't a future problem. It's here. And it forces us to ask a fundamental question. What do we owe each other? And when the money runs out, who's next in line to pay the price?